Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. Now, you're not going to believe this, but I woke up the other day, I looked outside, and there was snow. Do you realize we haven't had snow here in 9 years? And don't be shocked by this, but I liked it. You know, I'm a winter weenie, but you know what? When you're inside and you're warm and you can just look at the beautiful visuals, it's all good. So I'm in a good mood. I'm always extremely happy every time I record a podcast. But this is the big enchilada, episode 500. So I'm not just happy, I'm exuberant, I'm energized, I'm effervescent, and all of those other E words. In general, I'm pretty nostalgic. So when episode 500 was imminent, I was giving it a little thought. But it really wasn't until a current podcast listener that lives in Spartanburg, South Carolina, found out I was coming through South Carolina on that big North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina trip I took a couple weeks ago. And they said, would you like to go to dinner? So they treated me to dinner, the husband and the daughter. And the mom challenged me and said, hey, episode 500 is coming up. This is a big deal. What are you going to do for it? So it kind of got the wheels spinning in my brain. And, you know, the same podcast listener even gave me a gift. They said, this is a big deal. Go ahead and open the gift now if you want, or you can wait until 500. So I told her, I said, I'll wait till episode 500 goes live. So as soon as this thing hits the air, I'm going to open her gift. But it kind of made me think maybe I need to put a little bit more thought into this. So the more I thought about it, I wanted to have an interview on episode 500 that was important to me. And you'll get that today. Christoph Guttentag, Dean of Admission at Duke. And he's always somebody that I've admired, partly because of his transparency and genuineness, but also because I feel he really knows the complexities of holistic admissions. So he's always someone I've really enjoyed talking to and listening to speak. So you'll hear the first of 5 parts with him, although it's 2 different interviews. First is Understanding Duke, 2-parter. And then the last 3, which to be honest is my favorite, is Understanding How Duke Does Admissions. I also wanted to have a very important conversation before the interview. I think if I surveyed most listeners and I said to you, what does Stuck believe at the core when it comes to college admissions? You would probably say it's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. That's what will determine your career success or your career trajectory. And you would be correct if you selected this. But there's another really core value that I hold equally with the same fervor. I haven't been as overt in espousing it here, but it's just as much a core as the other one. And I bet our core listeners who never miss an episode might be flummoxed if I quizzed you and said, what is that other core value that I highly apprize? Well, I'm going to share that by way of a story. Now, I've shared this once before in the podcast, but one thing I've learned in 500 episodes is there's power in repetition, and we get new listeners all the time. And also, got so many things coming at you, even those who heard it probably don't remember. So I was working with an Atlanta student last year, actually, attended an independent school in Buckhead, which is a section of Atlanta. And he said to me, it's kind of sad that the college process has to beat you up so much. So I pushed back just reflexively by saying, this process doesn't have to beat you up if you don't let it. To which he replied, no, the process just beats you down. It's just the way that it is. Now, there's some context here. the student was getting a lot of pressure from his dad, who attended Elite U, and there was a lot of peer pressure coming from the independent school to go brand name. And even though the mom was pushing back rather vigorously, and I was supporting her, the boy was just feeling the pressure to go to brand name U from both his peers and from his dad. But a core value of what I am really trying to inculcate, both this is true for my counseling and it's true on this podcast, which is just an extension of my counseling, is to take a young person's confidence. And let's say on a scale of 10, your confidence is at a 6. I want it to be at a 7 or higher when you're done this process. Let's say it's at an 8.5. I want it in the 9s. Confidence is extremely important because without it, you'll never launch out and try anything outside your comfort zone. And you'll always be limited and you'll never reach your full potential. So in episode 500, I wanted to have a conversation about this biggest thing that I see that robs students of their confidence in this process, and it's the danger of having a top-heavy list and the danger of believing the canard that the more selective the college is, the better the college is for you. So Julie and I attempt to demolish that canard in what ends up being about a 35-minute conversation. This also aligns very closely with Susan Tree's core message that she's held with passion and fervor in the 22 years that I've known her and worked with her. And if you heard episode 499 and the QFL, question for a listener, that Susan and I answered from Chris from Minnesota, Susan brought this out there. She delivered this there with passion. And what is that message? Every one of your children is special, just as they are, whether they're a 2.0 or a 4.0, whether they're a 1600 SAT or an 800 SAT. So that message also dovetails really closely with what we want to bring out here in this episode. But to me, what really makes this episode personally special to me are the 21 of you who went to speakpipe.com/YCBK and you shared your own tips of things you have learned in these 500 episodes that you want to underscore, that you want to highlight, that you want to grab your fellow parents and students and counselors by the lapel and say, don't miss this truth. It's really helped me. And I want to bequeath this. I want to pass this on to you so it can help you. Now, sometimes you think of things later that you would do a little differently. If I were to do it over again, I wouldn't have said share something you've learned from the 500 episodes. I would have just said share something you've learned from college admissions, whether it was from our podcast or any other source. The request to share something from the 500 episodes was kind of trying to be sentimental, but it was never meant to be self-aggrandizing. It was always about recognizing that we're a community, and therefore we want to celebrate our listeners and all the wisdom that you have with other listeners. And parents, you have a power when you speak to another parent. And that is all I wanted to do. And for the most part, that's what we've got. Now, there were a few messages that came in, and I think it's because I wasn't as clear. And they were really more praise and approbation about your college-bound kid without really highlighting something you've learned. And so I'm not going to play those today, although I do appreciate the encouragement. It's a lot of work to do a podcast like this, but the work becomes fun when you know you're making a difference. And that's how all of our co-hosts are. We go into education to make a difference. And so when we see we're making a difference, we're inspired by that. So I apologize if you sent one in and it never made it to the final cut. It just had more to do with the fact that there wasn't really a lesson that you were sharing to help other parents or students. It was more just kind of praise for your college-bound kid. I know your heart was absolutely in the right place. Know that you did encourage me, but just don't be offended if you don't hear the message that you sent in. And one reason we wanted to make a powerful statement by having all of you participate in this podcast is because we're a community. We're a community. Even if it's a parasocial community, we're still a community. And we're a community that has a lot of wisdom within this community. I refer to you as our listening family with affection and sincerity. Just this week, a listener I've never met before, never done a Zoom call with, wouldn't know if I saw them on the elevator, never talked on the phone, reached out to me and said, I know you're going to attend NACAC in September in the fall. Columbus isn't that far away from Pittsburgh. So if you want to swing by Pittsburgh, I'd be happy to host a gathering for your College Bound Kid listeners. In fact, I've even got an extra floor at our place. If you want to stay there, you're welcome to do that if you don't want to stay in a hotel. That's a community. When I did my 26-state California trip from September 7th to October 3rd in 2024, seven of you reached out and offered to host a reception for listeners. And we said yes to three, one in San Diego, but we had another offer in San Diego. We said one to Santa Monica. We had another person offer in Santa Monica. And then we did one up in Northern California in Redwood City. That's how special this community is. Now I'm going to share something about myself I've never shared before. And it isn't something I'm proud of, although I'm over time learning to embrace it. Somehow I'm pretty sure it has something to do with my dad, who was kind of pretty macho. So somehow I've got it deeply embedded into my subconscious that real men don't cry. That crying is being soft, and men shouldn't be soft. But about 10 years ago, I don't know what happened. I just started becoming more sentimental. Just started having these situations that tears would well up, and sometimes even be crying like a baby. It's like the weirdest thing that happened to me 10 years ago. And I'm learning to embrace it, because my kids will be like, that is so cute. They find it endearing. Well, when I was listening to many of the SpeakPipe messages that you sent in for this episode, tears started welling up in my eyes. I was just deeply moved. And it was partly because I felt like the three messages are actually resonating. The first, prioritize match and fit over rankings and prestige. The second, you can go through this college process and have your kids' confidence soar and grow and not be chipped away at. And the third, your kid is special exactly for who they are, and the college process and acceptance letters that they get have absolutely nothing to do with how special they are. Those messages came through, and when they did, I was deeply moved. One parent emailed me and said, I was so nervous. I've never done anything like this, but I left a message for episode 500 because I just want parents to not miss something that I feel is really important. And when I played that message, tears welled up all in my eyes. And I'm thinking to myself, you big softy, what's happening to you? But part of me was like, maybe this is actually good. Maybe you're embracing your sentimental side better than you did before. So I just want to say thank you. There is no Your College Bound Kid without our amazing listeners. I'm more excited about the next 500 episodes than I was about the first 500. And I'm going to have to be incapacitated before you'll pull me away from this mic and keep coming here to meet with you with content to help you and your student and to help us carry out our mission of making college knowledge available to all. Now, I know what you're thinking. How in the heck are you going to play 21 messages? Well, these messages range from 30 seconds to almost 5 minutes. So are you going to play them all at one time? That's going to be a long episode. Well, this is going to be a long episode. It's going to be reminiscent of the 2-hour Thursday episodes we sometimes have. But no, we're not going to play them all at one time. We're going to play them in threesomes or triplets, 3 at a time. So approximately every 10 to 15 minutes, you're going to hear 3 different parents. Or in one case, at the very end of the podcast, the very, very end, a parent and a student combo from Missouri that got really creative in their recording. The messages are in no special order. They literally are going to play in the order they were sent in. First one you hear is the first one. The 18th is the last one. And you have to stay all the way at the end to hear the last 3. But before we dive into today's episode, I do want to make 2 announcements. The first month of Your College Bound Kid was February of 2018. We actually did an episode in September of 2017, but we pulled it back and took 5 more months to do more research. Anika and I, co-founder of this podcast, who I'm so thankful for. By the way, she's the one who came up with the name Your College Bound Kid. So if you like that name, the attestation goes to my co-founder, Anika Madden. So we were going to run it February 18 was when we actually launched, and we had 229 downloads for the entire month. Now, thank God, we get over 50,000 some months. So how did this happen? It happened by you spreading the word. So I want to thank every single person who mentions Your College Bound Kid on Reddit or in your Facebook group or your social media. We really get a lot of listeners from that. When I get a chance to talk to listeners, I often ask, how did you find their podcast? And many of them identify these social media forums as where somebody recommended the podcast. I also want to thank every listener who's told a friend, a family member, a coworker about your college-bound kid. What you're doing is invaluable. And what you're doing is one of the two main ways to help your college-bound kid grow, by spreading the word. I also want to thank every single one of you who's ever donated to our podcast. We made the decision to go commercial-free from day one. Did you know that in a 60-minute podcast, 18 minutes are commercials? So our donors have saved all of us from about 200 hours of commercials because we have over 600 hours of content. And we took a chance that within our listenership, there would be enough listeners who find joy in supporting causes they believe in by giving. And giving for these generous listeners who support us would be a joy and not a burden. And if you've stepped up and donated, words are not enough to express our gratitude. We have about 40 monthly donors, another 10 or so that give once a year, almost religiously, and about 150 others who have given one time. We have and I'm going to be more explicit and transparent with you about things moving forward. We have a budget of almost exactly $20,000, and not one penny has ever gone to a co-host, and it never will. Being a co-host is volunteerism, and that's a requirement for anybody to be a co-host. You got to know this is pure volunteerism. But that budget does go for some really important things, like our amazing sound engineer, Nemanja, who you have no idea the things he does. I mean, I'll tell you, last week I was freaking out because whatever I did, somehow I messed up, and I'm like just deplorable when it comes to technology, and people who know me know that. I sent him an audio file he couldn't use. It's like, I can't use this. Send me the right audio file. I didn't know how to generate the right audio file. I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my goodness. We've never been late in 498 episodes, and we're going to be late for the first time. So somehow he went in there and worked his magic and generated an audio file. So we'll always be grateful to him. Everyone I've ever referred who's starting a podcast, who uses him, comes back and thanks me over and over. So he's a big part of where your support goes. We also have an amazing webmaster, Stylionis. I mean, our team has been together now for over 5 years. And we have others as well who play a role. We have some small marketing expenses occasionally, and we have our image editor. And then we have another bunch of services. We have our YCBK newsletter person. We have a second person that helps with website maintenance and updates. And then we have a number of companies, about a half a dozen, that we pay to make the podcast, work. So we've got a company that does our transcriptions. We have 2 podcast software companies, Zencaster and Squadcast. We have Libsyn. That's the company that does our RSS feeds, which distributes the podcast all over Spotify, YouTube, all over the place. Maybe I'm getting more into the weeds than I need to. We have our SpeakPipe subscription fees. And, 50,000 downloads a month sounds great. And according to Libsyn, the company that does our distribution, we are in the top 3% of all podcasts in terms of audience size. But the main reason we get 50,000 downloads is because we have 2 episodes a week. And we have 500 episodes in our back catalog. Do you know that we only get 6,000 downloads per episode? Now, believe it or not, the last time I checked the national average is 141. But 6,000 downloads isn't a lot to me. When I think of all the students and parents and counselors that I believe would benefit from our content. So moving forward, we no longer want to only exclusively rely on organic marketing. We want that 6,000 to be at least 10,000, modestly, if not a lot more than that. So we do want to invest in podcast marketing. Don't be surprised if you're listening to another college admission podcast and you hear them say this podcast was sponsored by your college-bound kid. The problem with podcast marketing is we don't know what the heck we're doing. So if you have a background in podcast marketing, or if you know someone who has a background in podcast marketing, have them send a cover letter and a resume. Just send it directly to my email, marketschoolmatchforyou.com, marketschoolmatch4u.com. We don't have any money really for podcast marketing now, so any gifts that we receive above our basic expenses, we're going to try to invest them in getting the word out. Anyone who gives any donation in 2025, no matter if it's a one-time or a monthly, no matter how big or small, you're going to get some YCBK swag. just a special YCBK gift from us as an expression of our gratitude. So if giving brings you joy and you want to help, just go to yourcollegebounkid.com. You'll see the donate button. And thanks in advance to everyone who partners with us to help us reach our goal. And you know what that goal is? To make college knowledge available to all. Not just the wealthy, not just the middle class, not just Americans, but to all. And I'm still going to continue with my commitment to only bringing up money every 50 episodes. So don't expect to hear this again until episode 550. But if you do give in 2025, look for me to ask you for your address and look for your YCBK gift in your mailbox. My next announcement is that Princeton Review is really supportive of what we're doing, and I'm really thankful to Rob Franek. They have donated 100 books for the next 100 listeners who send in a SpeakPipe question that we answer on the air. And do you know we've already had 361 SpeakPipe questions or comments sent in? And I want to say we've been with SpeakPipe for a year and a half. So I have to have a special thanks to James Mason from Mississippi, who along with Vince Garcia, that's right, co-host Vince Garcia, they've been monthly supporters of Your College Bound Kid from day one. But James was the one who challenged me multiple times to set up a format to allow our listeners to speak their own voices. He was like, hey, Stuck, I got this other podcast I listen to. And listeners call in and you hear their own voices, and it's really neat. I think it'd be a nice addition to the podcast. I said, hey, yeah, thanks, James. Didn't do anything on it. 6 months later, reaches out again. So I'm thankful to James for that, because to me, it makes us feel a lot more like a community. So let me share the books that you're going to get to choose from if we select your question and answer it on the air. And this will go into effect right away on Thursday's episode 501. So if we select your question on episode 501 or moving forward, you can expect to have 4 choices in books. And friends, here are the 4 books you get to choose from. The Best 390 Colleges 2025 version by Rob Franek, David Soto, Stephen Koch, and Aaron Riccio. Secondly, College Admissions 101 3rd edition by Rob Franek. Third, creative name, Essays That Kicked Apps. Love that. Essays That Kicked Apps. 55 unforgettable college admission application essays that got students accepted. And lastly, Princeton Review Digital SAT Prep 2025 version. So those will be your 4 choices. And we're excited to send that to you for you sending in a question from a listener via SpeakPipe. But we're only taking them by SpeakPipe, so don't email them in. So those are your 4 choices. Now, I will communicate with you to see which book you want, and Princeton Review is going to mail it directly to you. So please keep going to speakpipe.com/YCBK and sending in those great questions just like you've been doing. Sending you a book for your time is just our way of saying thank you for helping us to improve our knowledge about college. And special thanks again to Rob Franek, the chief editor of Princeton Review, for his generosity. And Rob is our current interview on our Thursday podcast. Now, the next voice you're going to hear is from 3 of our listeners with their words of wisdom. And that will be followed by my conversation with Julia. And remember, you want to stay to the very end to hear the last 3 messages that came in. I think they're inspiring, and one of them's from a student.
Hi, my name's Mark, and I'm talking to you from Hangzhou, China, where I'm a high school university counselor in an international school. I've been in China. I've been teaching internationally for about 30 years. I've been in China for 22 of them, and for 16 of those, I've been a high school counselor. I want to congratulate your college-bound kid team for reaching their 500th episode. That is quite an outstanding achievement. I think that I'm a fairly good counselor, I guess, and I work pretty hard on my professional development. And I just want to let you guys know that, and this is the honest truth, you guys are my number one source of PD. I think there's something I learn something in every episode. And sometimes it's something small, like, and sometimes it's something big, like, wow, why didn't I think of that? Or, gosh, why didn't I know that? Um, Probably the most useful resource or helpful resource that I've gotten from your podcast would be the university factors list, when that a student can look at when they're coming up about what's important for them in a school. I know, Mark, you've tweaked that and worked with that, and I just find it a really, really powerful resource. I have used it several times with students and given it to the parents, and I just find that it is so thorough and covers so many important aspects that normally, I wouldn't be thinking of, and certainly the students and the parents wouldn't be thinking of it. And I find not only that it's thorough, but it leads to really great discussion and dialogue between the student and the parents, and between me, the counselor. And so it's just a fantastic resource. And if your listeners out there haven't used it, use it. I think you really will. You'll really see some benefits from that. I just want to say again, congratulations for reaching that huge milestone, and here's to another 500 episodes, and I'll definitely be there listening the whole way. So happy New Year to you guys, and really, 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 I hope you guys understand and know just how valuable the work that you're doing and how much people like myself really appreciate it. Take care.
Hi, Mark. This is Lisa from Lexington, Massachusetts. Happy 500th episode. First, I want to say thank you for the incredible, invaluable information that you and your team have shared over the past 499 episodes. I can't say that I've listened to them all yet, but I hope to. My twins have just submitted all of their college apps, and now we wait. I've so enjoyed learning from you, Julia, Susan, and all your fantastic guest speakers that I'm pivoting in my career and becoming an IEC myself. It's hard for me to pick just one thing to share for your 500th episode, so I've narrowed it to a few. I loved your recent Andy Strickler interview about early decision, time to match when we were going through the process ourselves. Episode 442, 50 Questions About Money, was super insightful and left me wishing we had discussed those questions at the very beginning of our college search process. Of course, any interview with Jeff Salingo is appreciated and gets high praise. However, one episode was extremely helpful to me in setting realistic expectations about the number of spots available to my student at a Reach for All school. I'm referring to episode 292, where Hilary Dickman describes how to use a school's common data set to get an idea of how many spots are available based on the characteristics of your student. That exercise helped me realize that the chances of my son obtaining a coveted spot at an elite school was infinitesimal and helped me prepare him for denial. It also helped us find schools where he had a good chance of being admitted. Finally, one of your recommended resources, College Aid Pro, was also invaluable as we tried to estimate merit aid. So far, the College Aid Pro estimates have been a bit low. Happily, we've been offered more merit than we anticipated. I don't know where my twins will end up, but I'm confident that they will enroll at great fit colleges, hugely because of all the valuable information learned through your podcast. Thank you so much, and here's to the next 100 episodes.
Hi, YCBK team. Congratulations on your 500th episode. This is Sheridan from Colorado, and I have learned so much from Mark and your team. What a joy that you bring so much college knowledge to all. One area, or actually two areas that I wanted to comment on was the fact that you talked about rolling admissions years ago and how it's so amazing to be part of a rolling admissions because that gives you an early win. And now I think with direct admissions that you've talked about, and I've emailed you about, that wow, what an amazing opportunity for students to see that they can get into college and it might be a great one for them. And then number two, I've learned that my favorite quote from you, and I truly believe this, is that it is not where you go, but what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out. Thank you for 500 episodes, and I'm looking forward to 500 more.
All right, friends, Julia is back, and we're continuing our series of conversations about things that, we observe in the counseling room that, we just think you can learn from. And the one we want to talk about today is extremely important, and we really hope you'll listen. And it has to do with students having lists that are too top heavy.
Yep.
That's too many, choose your term, long shots, unlikelies, reach for all schools, and highly rejective schools, and having imbalanced college lists.
Mm-hmm.
And Julia, why don't you start out and just share the danger we see of students doing this from the mental health standpoint? And I feel so strongly about this topic. And every once in a while, when I feel really, really strongly about a topic, it was probably about a year and a half ago, I felt really strongly about a topic. That topic was inspired by a listener named Nishant from Texas who asked, how is my daughter supposed to decide when she has several great options? And Julia, Susan, and Lisa all recorded their answers to that question. By the way, it's all on one audio file too, under yourcollegemounkid.com. You can listen to all three of them together. And I had you do a segment on it. I had Lisa do a segment on it. I had Susan do a segment on it. I also want to have a conversation with Lisa on the podcast on this as well.
Yes.
I've never come at this from a psychologist standpoint. If our schedules would have aligned, I was going to try to see if all three of us could have done this together. But I'm just going to have a conversation with you and a conversation with Lisa. I think it's so important that our listeners hear different voices and hear it two times. But Julia, go ahead and take it where you want to go. And I know we'll just have a good, honest conversation about this.
Yeah, this would absolutely rank in my top three biggest deals to me. And I am coming from a place where I work with students who are applying to very selective places. So the top heavy gets very heavy, right? And this is my 9th year as a counselor, and I can unequivocally tell you this is one of the main reasons my heart is broken. I stay up at night. I am stressed about this job is because of students having too long of a list that is often top heavy, or even just a fully top heavy list. Maybe it's like less than 10 schools. There is ample research, you can Google it, that there is an actual correlation between the length of your college list and the imbalance in it, so a top heavy list, and adverse mental health effects. What I say to my students every year, and I don't think it goes through to anyone, and I get that. I don't think it would go through to me either, because you don't know till you're in it. You might intellectually know something, but you don't emotionally know something. At the beginning of the year, I will tell my students who have a top heavy list, I am very concerned about this, and that you might get, 15 no's out of 17 applications. And they're like, that's okay. I'm okay with that. Like, I want to risk it. Like, it's, I want to take my chances. And I like those other two schools that are my likelies. I have never seen that work out well for a student. First of all, if you all want to play that game, then I would ask you to check your calculus, because we all know math doesn't work that way. So it is not that it's random admission statistics, right? It's not random admissions where there's pull from a pool and they decide to admit. It is not rolling the dice. You are the same die every time. You have the same chances at these schools, right? So just because you've applied to more does not mean you're going to get more yeses. And in fact, every time I've seen a student do that,
it always is all no's across the board. There has never once been a magical, like, oh, one of them said yes, or, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have reach schools, and I would love for the day that no one has unlikelies, but I'm not saying you can't do that. But I'm talking about a list that is made up of all unlikely and reaches, especially in the regular round. Those reaches have now become unlikely. So those unlikelies are like, they were never an option anyways. So I will say this. I have had students, I will tell students, I say, like, I don't think you're ready for that kind of rejection. I don't think you're ready. Your mental health wise, it's going to feel way worse than you think it does. And every year, that's exactly how it is. I've had students in the fetal position. I've had students, I don't even want to talk about how serious that level of rejection got. When you get like a bunch of no's in a row, it's not like it stings less every time. It just hurts more and more. And now you're making a choice between maybe one or two colleges, if you're lucky, on your top heavy list. And that doesn't feel good either, because you've now limited your choices as well. And about 6 months after this whole process, I find that every student finally gets the perspective that they need wherever they go and realize, like, ooh, that's not how that works. And that wasn't at all in the interest of me finding a good college and good fit for myself at all. And I'm just going to compound that with the communities I've worked in. Whether or not you try to keep your college list to yourself, it gets out somehow. And or when everyone's celebrating their admits and you don't have any to celebrate, especially with social media, I really see students really doing poorly with that. And it's a very hard hole to dig out of. That's just the mental health ramifications. There's a lot of other ramifications of an unsuccessful list and an imbalanced top-heavy list. One, how do you write all those? And I'll definitely quote our friend Susan, who wrote a lovely article about this way back when. Maybe, I don't remember when, but if you're applying to all of these schools, and they're pretty selective, right? How are you supposed to stick out with all this limited amount of time you have to research thoroughly these schools and then answer? A lot of these selective schools tend to have a lot of supplements that are very difficult to answer. Why us in 100 words? How do you make a compelling argument when it's a 2% admit rate for why them in 100 words when you're doing this for 5 other schools? How do you do that, right? You can't always copy and paste. And then also, that is time you should be working on your school and extracurricular activities. That matters more than how many schools did you apply to and whatnot. Also, financially, like, that's just ridiculous. You're throwing money away at this point, only for rejection. Why would you want to pay $85 to get a no? I know you think one of these will work out of all of them. If you think that, then maybe you're not ready to apply to the very selective places, because that's not how that works or how the math works. And then also, if you, I don't think many 17 or 18-year-olds are really ready to play a high-risk game. And that's what Rod Skinner, I like to borrow this from him. Selective admissions, a top-heavy list, is a high-risk game. If you went and talked to your financial advisor about doing something similar, they'd be like, no, this is stupid. Why would you ever do that? You're putting time and money into something that's going to have zero return. Why would you do that? So it's really I don't think anyone is ready for that high risk of a game where you're just getting no's and no's and no's and losing. It really does, as much as you'll heal from it, I hope. I had a colleague that got an email back from a student from over 20 years ago talking about this conversation they had 20 years ago, and that student is still reeling from that experience. And this was when colleges weren't as selective as they are now.
Yeah, Julia, you mentioned a lot of points, from the time point to the money point and the mental health point, all valid. I'm going to say a lot of things on the mental health point. One of the things I'm going to do later today is text a family I'm working with, lovely people, husband and wife, and tell them that I need to talk to them, because I really fear for their daughter in what I'm expecting based on decisions I've seen from certain schools, and how, she's an amazing person, but her confidence is fragile already. And I'm very, very concerned. And she's already sent the applications off to, I'm not going to name the schools, but you could probably figure out the hardest
Yep.
to get in.
Yep.
And so that's already done. So I've had past conversations already to try to share what from data and research and what I thought the chances were. And I get it. We don't want to, it's a balancing act because, the dad brought a good point. I never, he's very high position in his world. And he's like, I wouldn't have got the opportunities I got if I didn't take some chances, do some things. And so
Yep.
I didn't raise my kids to be risk averse.
Yep. I've heard that.
No, but there's some validity to that, right?
Sure.
I don't want to encourage people to be so super cautious and never take chances, never go for the promotion, never go for that. So I get that. So that's why this is tricky to get the balance. But I need to talk to them. The decision has already been made, but once the decision has been made, it's still going to sting, but it will sting a lot less if somebody is actually not expecting to get in.
Yep.
And so I now want you to prepare your student to not expect to get in. And you should not be surprised. And that's the best we can do at this point. And I need to have this conversation. All right, friends, let's hear some more wisdom from 3 more of our listeners.
Hey, Mark, it's Barbara from Akala. So I've been thinking for the last couple of weeks about what do I want to say on your 500th episode. And I couldn't find one thing. Like, there's just so many, and I didn't really know where to begin. So the first thing I did think of was my favorite thing in the world that you do, which is, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. That may have been a little bit misquoted, but it's been my mantra with my students for the past 35 years. And I so appreciate that that's so prominent on your broadcast. And then I was thinking, okay, what else? Okay, what have I learned? And then tonight, just tonight, I'm listening to the episode on college majors and how do schools evaluate you based on the major that you're applying for. And this has been something that I've been wrestling with now for the past year, trying to figure out on our website, for example, how can we give students information about these direct admit programs and how our college is evaluating them? And boom, you did it tonight. And I think that even though all 499 episodes will have been my favorites up to the 500th, tonight really nailed it for me. So mazel tov on your 500th. Here's to another 500 at least. And please keep up the work. What you do is a blessing for everybody.
Hi, Mark and YCBK family. I'm a mom from Arizona. Here are a few meaningful things I've learned from listening to your podcast. First off, there are a lot of wonderful colleges and universities out there if you look past the top 25 U.S. News and World Report list. So don't give up hope if your student does not have straight A's and a perfect SAT score. Change your mindset to one of helping your student find the right fit. What's the right fit for your kid will be different for other students. And just like you say on your podcast, college isn't a prize to be won, but a match to be made. Encourage your student to look up the specifics for majors and general ed requirements at the colleges they're interested in. There's a lot of different flavors of ice cream out there in this area, so don't assume that the requirements are same at every school. Also, I think every family should listen to episode 492, specifically the part about 30 things to rank when building your college list. I did this recently with my 11th grader, and it resulted in some really great open dialogue. She came up with her top 10, I came up with my top 10 list, and then we compared notes and talked about it, and it's really helped our family a lot. So thank you. Also, interview 188 about what to do to maximize your college visits was really helpful when we were going on college tours with our eldest child, who is now a college freshman. And If you're a student with a learning disability or you know someone who is, you really should listen to interview 183, Pathways for Success for Students with Disabilities with Elizabeth Hamblett. I passed this information on to some friends of mine who have learning disabled kids. That interview is full of awesome suggestions and things to consider if you're a learning disabled student. And last but not least, the quotes you include at the end of every episode have been so helpful to our family. During high school, our now college freshmen had some academic bumps in the road. And your quote of, "Your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude," helped us guide her through it to an attitude of resilience. She went from saying, "Maybe I'm just not smart enough for this," to, "This is just a bump in the road. I can do it." So thanks very much for all you do. Have a great day.
Hi, Mark and team. It's Allison from Ohio. Congratulations on 500 episodes. As you know, I'm a regular listener, and your content is a big part of my ongoing professional development. A tip I wanted to share from my own experience in admissions and from listening to you and your guests is not to be afraid of contacting the admissions office directly if you have specific questions for a particular school. Sometimes I think families think of the admissions director or the enrollment director like the Wizard of Oz, and nobody has access to the wizard. Now, likely when you call, you may be speaking with a munchkin or representative of the admissions office, but the answer you get is going to be the same as if you were speaking to the wizard. As we have learned from so many of your guest speakers, admissions staff are wonderful people who have chosen to work in this field to help students. Sometimes it is best to go straight to the source to get an answer to your question, so don't be afraid to reach out. Good luck with the next 500. I look forward to listening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Our regular listeners know that every time I interview someone on the podcast, one of the questions I always close with, it's always in the end of the section. We're in the lightning round, but I always ask them for their best advice for students, parents, and sometimes I throw college counselors in there. If I would, and I've thought to myself, well, Stuck, what would you say if you were being asked that yourself and you were being interviewed? And one of the things that I would say for advice for parents is this is a really delicate time in students' life for their own self-esteem with peer comparisons. Julia mentioned it, social media, a lot of things that are coming at them. This college process can beat you down if you let it and adversely impact your kid's self-esteem.
Yes.
For years. If you let it. And the way that you don't let it is by partly educating yourself. And it's by not having unrealistic expectations.
Yep.
It is by respecting the competition. And, in a lot of ways, the list is the last part, Julia, right? Because we could talk about where you go on your college visits. When you go to North Carolina, it should not just be to Chapel Hill and Duke. Right? When you go to California, it should not just be USC, UCLA, and Berkeley and Stanford. When you go to Chicago, it shouldn't just be to visit Northwestern and the University of Chicago. When you visit Boston, it shouldn't just be to visit Harvard and MIT. When you go to Texas, it shouldn't just be to visit UT Austin and Rice. So it starts there on where you go.
Yes.
Right? Because now you're creating expectations, right?
Yes.
It starts there, but it carries over. The list is fun of the culmination of it, the last part. But, I have this new family I'm working with, Julia. We haven't even, we're really just starting. I haven't even built the list out for them yet. But they said something to me that was like music to my ears. They said, I just want you to know when you're working on the list for my student, I would like her to get more yeses than no's. So keep that in mind.
Yep.
And I was like, this is really wise.
Yeah.
The point that Julia made that I really hope you guys hear is, in theory, it sounds good in theory. I get this a lot, especially from my Florida families. Because Florida has a couple of programs, Florida Prepay, Florida Bright Futures, and people can almost go in-state for next to nothing. They've got Florida Prepay and Bright Futures is the merit scholarship program. Florida Prepay, they put some money in early on and they lock in certain rates. And so a lot of times they kind of know that they're, depending on how strong of a student they are, they're going to get in FSU, maybe UF, And so a lot of times they'll sort of come to work with me because they want to take a shot at these super highly selectives, and they kind of feel like, okay, I've got that in my back pocket. And so then they want to go for a whole bunch of these uber selectives, knowing that between FSU and USF, maybe UCF, I'm kind of good there.
Yeah.
And the thing, it sounds good in theory, but it's just not how it works.
Right.
It really, really stings. It really, and I'm not, once again, there certainly is a balance here. We're not saying not to take some shots here or there.
Right.
I'm okay with that as long as you have appropriate expectations and as long as it's not an overwhelming amount of schools on your list.
Right. And interfering with your overall strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there is some validity to, what that partner law firm told me about, and didn't get where I got by, not taking chances, and didn't encourage my kids to be risk averse. So I heard you, but I'm going to do it my way. I get that, but it doesn't work in reality emotionally.
No.
And I think I've shared this once before on the podcast. So I have a conversation with another family I work with. First kid's super high flyer. Second kid is not quite as strong. And so they're coming back, and they hadn't quite made that calibration to the levels of schools that the second kid could look at. So I had this conversation, and they received it so well because the mom said that I'm in the business of the writing world, where you have to send off manuscripts and transcripts to get them approved.
Yeah.
And when I get rejected for the 18th time, and I'm in my 50s, and I don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
So if I can't handle that well in my 50s, why should I expect my kid to handle that well?
100%.
And
exactly.
She's totally made the adjustment.
Yep.
And now we've got an amazing list, and it's good. But I just feel like in theory it sounds good.
Right.
But in reality, it's really, really hard.
Yep.
And Julia's point is true. Like, I encourage people, you can say, hey, my family has said we want to keep the college list within the family, but that doesn't always work. It still ends up getting out there.
I know.
And even, there's little things you can do to try to not have the pain be as public. But even if you don't do that, I know how many students talk about, my peers are getting in these places, and it's just really, really hard. What they're putting on social is really hard. And that's just,
you can't
avoid
escape
it. You can't escape it.
Even if you don't tell people where you're applying, you're going to hear where everyone else applies and got into. And gosh, these and parents, don't do this either. Get off of unvetted Facebook groups and Reddit and all these unvetted sources, because the amount of parents I have also heard that want to do this because they read somebody else did that in these forums, is that I know you want the best for your child, but unfortunately, our children believe their self-worth is wrapped up in their admission decisions. And that is just the reality of it. They're watching their friends. They're seeing that. I've had quite a few students lie about where they got into school because and put it on social media. They did that out of embarrassment because they didn't want, or I have a lot of students that come to me and say, Miss Esquivel, I heard blah, blah, blah got into that place. I'm like, what? They definitely did not. Of course, I can't confirm or deny, and I never will.
Sure.
But it's all around you, even if you keep it to yourself. So, and parents, this is where you can really help too. Shut down the Thanksgiving conversations. Shut down your family friend with the best of intentions asking where your child's applying. It's just a different culture now, and and unfortunately our students do see their self-worth in their admission decisions. And so if you're a parent and you're all about your child's self-esteem and supporting them, it does not make sense to put them into a position where their self-worth will continue to be diminished.
One of the nicest things that was said to me when I was talking to one of my kids, and they are aware of somebody who's going through all this, and they were like, Dad, I'm so glad that you didn't put us under that kind of pressure, and how you in the way in which you raised us. That was one of the nicest things that one of my own kids said to me, you can have a student. I'm just going to speak in terms of academics just to give a sense. Let's say they're like a 3.0 student. Let's say they have like 1100 SAT, 21, 22 ACT. And that student can end up feeling so much better about themselves
Yes.
than a super high flyer.
Yes.
Simply for a couple reasons. One, the college list that they had, and two, how parents celebrate their acceptances
Yes.
at all of their schools. Like that kid can feel great about themselves.
100%.
And one of my goals for everyone that I work with is I want their confidence enhanced
Yes.
at the end of this process.
Yes.
Not debilitate it.
Right.
And that's why that would be some of my advice when I go back to like, what would you say? I would say, I want this college process to be confidence enhancing, not confidence debilitating.
Yes.
And so that is going to mean people having a broader college list. And it's going to mean parents and others around them celebrating their acceptances, and not because you feel like if I say it, maybe it will help, but you really don't believe it, because they can tell, they'll know what you really think.
100%.
They'll know what you really think.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't stress it enough, because it is really painful when you are doing counseling and you are with a kid who's a great kid,
Mm-hmm.
who has so many things to offer the world and should be feeling really, really good about themselves.
Yep.
But they're not feeling good about themselves because they overshot.
Yep.
They got a lot of rejection.
Yep.
They've created expectations for themselves that are not realistic.
Right.
All right, friends, let's hear some more tidbits of wisdom from 3 more of our listeners.
Hello, YCBK team. Congratulations on reaching 500 episodes. What an accomplishment. I am a mom from New England, and I am so grateful for all of your help with the college process. I've learned so much from the podcasts, but the biggest thing that stands out to me is your explanation of standard strong applicants. This was a 2-part discussion on episodes 362 and 364. I always recommend this series to friends with high school students. These episodes help my family to not only manage our expectations, but also to understand what is needed as far as extracurriculars go in order to achieve my child's goals. Thank you again for all that you do, and congratulations.
Hey there, it's Mitzi from Texas. And one quick tip that we actually utilized from this podcast regarding letters of recommendation, when to ask, who to ask, what to ask, specifically asking a teacher from the junior year of a core class teacher of junior year. And my daughter reached out in March, just shortly after spring break of her junior year, just to kind of get ahead of the rush of students that might be asking one particular teacher, and reflecting on which teacher would be best to ask. The questions that she had mentioned to herself, or we had written down from the podcast, were: have I done well in this class? Am I a strong enough presence in the class that the teacher knows me well? Have I approached the teacher outside of the class to discuss specific lessons that interest me? Have I seeked out mentorship with this teacher or ideas from this teacher? Does the teacher have a sense of what makes me special? Does the teacher's class link up with or complement my intended major? And then she created a 1-pager brag sheet with some bullet points that she wanted the teacher to possibly highlight. I know that some private schools do that for students. We're public school kiddos, and we had to make the brag sheet ourselves. But anyway, then she composed an email, and the email went some along the lines of: thank you so much for agreeing to write this letter of recommendation for me. As part of my application, I am trying to stress X, Y, and Z values outside of class. I think that extracurricular A and B that I am involved in showcase these values very well, but I'm hoping that in your letter of recommendation, you could focus on list X, Y, and Z values. I've been thinking about my time in your class, and here are 2 or 3 memories that have stood out to me that align with these values. Then you can write 2 or 3 short paragraphs to talk about specific interactions with the context that the teacher would need in case the teacher does not remember that interaction. So anyway, it's probably a lot. Sorry for the lengthy message, but congrats again on the 500th episode. Thank you for all that y'all do. So appreciate you, and y'all take care. Bye.
Hi, I just wanted to do two things as a parent and longtime listener now. One, thank you so much for answering my daughter's question, which she sent in a few weeks ago about rock climbing. The fact that you were able to source an answer from other families and other people in the field really not only gave her a bunch of really great information, which we've passed along to other rock climbing families and friends, but also just made her feel really heard and appreciated, and not alone in having this question. Felt, I guess, very validating. So thank you very much. I did want to also thank you and add as my recommendation for other families what has been really helpful for us. I really, really recommend that other families take the 30 things to think about list that you shared on a recent podcast. I forget the exact number. Print them out. I wrote them just down in Word and cut them out and made 3 copies, one for me, one for my spouse, and one for my daughter. And we all ranked them on our own and then talked about what was different about our rankings. And it was an incredibly helpful conversation. I think it was the most helpful conversation we have had thus far with the 3 of us together in one room, where everyone was just sharing what they were thinking and why they thought certain things were important or not important, or what was going on in their head. I felt like it was the first time we had a low stress, really open and sort of vulnerable conversation with each other about where our stresses were and what we were all thinking. So thank you so much for that list of 30 things. I really, really recommend it to other families, especially if you're in a situation like I think so many of us are, which is we all have our own priorities and our own things that we're stressed about or thinking about, and it's really hard to get on the same page. So thank you so much for that list. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being responsive to our questions. And thank you for making us feel heard and like we're part of a community and not just in it on our own. Thank you so much.
Now, I will say in fairness, Julia, I have seen sometimes that scatter shot thing work. I have to say that I have.
Don't say that out loud.
I know, but I just feel I have to be honest. But it's the exception, not the norm.
Yes.
And it's certainly not for people way out of profile.
No,
You know,
no.
It's for super strong, standard strong kids that maybe get in a Cornell or something like,
100. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
These are our number one kid who didn't get their early school that might get something of similar selectivity in the regular round, or like.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of like several kids that ED dependent didn't get in, but got in Cornell regular and passed a wide net. So I have seen it sometimes work, but most of the time it doesn't.
Right.
And most of the time it just doesn't.
But also important for listeners to know, those students might, if they don't, even if they add a bunch of top heavies, they're still likely in a worst case scenario going to a they're going to like
Wisconsin.
Or not even, like maybe they're still going to like a Colgate or a Davidson, or like these are still or a Tufts, still very selective. So it's not like, I was going to go to University of Arizona, but now I got into Duke. These are students that already had their foot in the door.
And then, you know what? And actually, this is an opportunity to say something for the millionth time, and I can't stress it enough. And we're speaking mostly to parents here. Please don't judge schools just by selectivity. Don't assume harder to get in equals better.
Right.
That is how so many people keep score. Harder to get in.
This is where we are. Why we are where we are. Yes.
Harder to get in equals better. Think about it. That's a very limited, myopic view of this process.
I don't know about you, Mark, when I talk to parents about that, because that's what they're thinking, right? They actually, this comes up a lot when I do introduce likely and target options, I suddenly get, well, I'm worried my child won't be like intellectually challenged at that school. And guess what? My students coming out of Milton Academy, I will tell you, almost all of them come back and say college is easier than Milton was. And our students that struggle the most go to the least selective schools. It's because because everyone who is there is not because they were a trust fund kid or donated or had a hook. Does not mean that, the selectivity does not have to do with the intellectual caliber of the student or the quality of the school whatsoever. You have a much better return on your investment on some of the minority serving institutions in California. The Cal State schools have a much higher return of investment for low income Latinx folks than Harvard does, for example. So, It is really not.
Drives me
And
crazy
parents,
because
especially, like a lot of the parents we work with, right, are lawyers, doctors. They all have advanced degrees in something. And I say, who is some of like the most tough people you've worked with? Like the people that just don't know what they're doing. They can't get their job done. They can't find their way out of a paper bag. Then they start to realize, these parents are like, oh wait, like that Harvard guy I work with has no idea like where Panama is. But then this, the other person I work with who went to UMass Amherst is actually much better than the other person, right? It does not, the selectivity has nothing to do with the quality of the school or the quality of the students in terms of resources and intellectualism.
Yeah, and you'll probably go a little further than me. Like I think selectivity can be important. Who you're around. It's just I think a lot of other things are important.
Yep.
A lot of other things are important. I really felt bad. I had a really good tour guide when I was at UNC Wilmington, and she had transferred from NC State,
Mm-hmm.
and she took a lot of heat from that from her family because NC State, just because it's more selective.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying, she was talking to me about it after the tour. She's like, this relative said this and this relative said that. So don't they care if I'm happy? Like, she wasn't getting a feeling of community. She wanted that feeling of community. She got way more sense of community. She's happier there. And I commend her for making the decision for her own personal happiness.
Yeah.
And, it'd almost be like saying, only thing I care about and who I want to date is if they're rich.
Right.
And then you're with a complete rich jerk who's a philanderer, an abuser, and all these things, but they're rich, right? Like,
right.
How happy is your life, right? And so, because all of this comes from this pressure that there's the good schools and the not good schools.
Yeah.
That's why I bring that up.
Yes.
Because it's all about selectivity.
Oh yeah.
It's all about, a lot of it is about, is the name impressive? Is that name impressive in the parent circle or in the student group? And I know this is, Julie, I know you're in the belly of the beast because I work with students all around the country, and Boston is about as bad as it gets.
It really is.
It's the most, no, it's bad. There's so much pressure in Boston.
So much.
I've been very public. Boston, New York, and Palo Alto are the places that I see the most pressure of any places. And when I have my Midwest families, they are so chill, unless they're from the North Shore. Sorry. The North Shore is an exception, but the North Shore of Chicago, sometimes they're like more like Boston, but other places, like you get your Iowas and your Michigans and your Wisconsins and your Minnesotas. And that, to me, is such a Ohio. It's just a healthier approach to how they approach this process.
Yep.
And they're just not consumed with name and consumed with prestige and consumed with impressing peers.
Right.
The Southeast tends to be very good, but South Florida and that greater Miami area all the way up to Palm Beach, I would say, and everywhere in between, but mostly in that Miami area, some of the Florida private schools could almost be like Boston. San Diego, I feel, is very healthy compared to other parts of the country. Bethesda, the Northern Virginia area, and Princeton to North Jersey is stress city. Westchester County in New York, Scarsdale, parts of Queens can be stress city. And to be honest, every time you have a community of very high achieving families, you can find yourself in a toxic environment, no matter where you are in the country. And selective private schools can be bad for this, no matter where you are, because people have paid money, and it's easy to have the mindset, I expect to have significantly more selective college options than I feel like I would have had if I hadn't paid money and I'd gone to my local public school. So that builds pressure. But particularly if you're in one of these very difficult areas, or if you're in a selective independent school or a boarding school, almost no matter where you are, your job as a parent is going to be tougher because it's the air you breathe and it's the water you drink in those environments. To have a certain amount of pressure on going to quote unquote the right schools. And you're paddling upstream. But you can have success in protecting your kids' self-image when they apply to college if you build a balanced list, reject the notion that selectivity equals better, and if you can adopt a mindset that a Boston family, yes, Boston family told me last year when the dad said, hey, Mark, it's not like the name of the school is not important to me, But I just believe there are hundreds of great schools, not 20. And this is a dad, and he and his wife went to the brand name colleges. But his son did not feel the pressure because the parents were defining a successful search on fit and match, and they embraced a broader college list.
And those, I don't know about you, but like, at least in my, high octane place, the students that do get the most yeses, and actually, I'll, like, just like you were saying earlier, Mark, my students are sometimes the bottom of the class actually have far more success in the college process because they've decided, they're like, I don't want to be part of this rat race that much longer, right? And I'm not saying they're not getting into selective schools, they are. But I had even probably my favorite thing is that I have a student who wrote me a thank you letter and said, and this student was towards the bottom of their class and really kind of woke up as a student their senior year and applied to a bunch of appropriate places for fit, and then had a couple reaches, but mostly targets and likelies, might clean up, might get everything as a yes, and wrote me a thank you about how their confidence has been reinstilled in them. And that wasn't me. That was them. Actually, they did that for themselves. They showed up and they got a lot of great yeses. And so sometimes that actually makes them more ready for college and more excited about college and more invested. It felt like they feel like, they were seen, and that like, oh gosh, I guess other people think I can do this too. And it was really empowering for that student.
I mean, there's so many advantages. Like, first of all, you get to be happy.
Yes.
If you pick a place based on fit and match. And then you're more likely to be successful.
Yes.
And then there's advantages for you being like a big fish in a small pond when it comes to a lot of things, opportunities that you get, and then that leads to confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with a family I work with from California last year, and the student picked San Diego State over University of California, Santa Barbara. Well, San Diego State is not as selective as UCSB.
Mm-hmm.
And the mom was saying he's so happy there. He's so glad that he went with SDSU over UCSB, even that UCSB is the more selective school.
Yeah.
And so if they can just reject this canard that selectivity is the be all and end all, and you can put schools in. I mean, I just bristle. I just have this reflexive reaction anytime someone says, obviously so-and-so is the better school.
Right. Ugh.
Because to me, it's like, better for who? That's why I just recoil at rankings. Rankings for who?
Right.
I will tell you highly ranked schools are good schools. It doesn't mean they're good for you. All right, friends, let's hear some more insights from 3 more of our listeners.
Hi, I am a mom in New Jersey with a daughter who is a senior in high school this year. Your podcast has helped me so much, and us, in 2 ways. The first is that she was deferred from her top choice school, and it's an Ivy Plus. So I guess the deferral is an exciting thing, but we weren't really sure what that meant. And your podcast referred to it right away. I went back and listened to the old episode. I don't remember the number. In any case, the old episode walked us through how to write a letter of continued interest, and she is working on that now and is very excited about that. I think when the deferral originally came in, she was so disappointed, but knowing the steps to take when you are deferred was really helpful, and your podcast gave us a lot of information that we didn't know from her school. The second thing we learned is about glimpse videos. We had no idea that glimpse video was even used by college offices, and it's very new. Her guidance counselor at school never mentioned it, and she goes to a top high school in New Jersey, but I guess it's just so new. So she went to the glimpse website and found that I think 13 of her schools, almost all of them, accept a glimpse video. So she quickly recorded one and submitted it to all of her schools. And I think that gave her a lot of confidence that she would be seen in a different way next to her essays and her application. So both of these things were very helpful in her application process and also just our support of her as parents guiding a senior through this process. So thank you so much for all the great episodes and congratulations on 500.
Hi, Mark. I am one of your very faithful listeners who doesn't miss an episode, and I particularly love the length of your episodes and all the deep dives because they keep my mind occupied during all of the domestic drudgery and my exercise hours. So thank you for all of that. One of the things that I found really helpful recently was in a conversation that you were having in response to a question from a listener, I think, and you were discussing how college admissions readers start by reading transcripts kind of backwards, where they start from the most recent classes and backwards through the years. And basically in response to the question of sequencing in classes and the amount of rigor that kids can achieve. And I found this really helpful to know because we are a U.S. Foreign Service family, which means we're raising our kids all over the world. They are going to different schools, and their high school transcripts might have multiple schools represented on them, and they do not offer the same types of courses. They don't necessarily offer accelerations or intensified options earlier on. And it could just look very different than a more typical US based transcript. So it was very comforting for me to know that wherever my kids end up at their final high school and the level of rigor that they're able to get to is going to count for them rather than worrying about if they were able to have this rigor all throughout their high school careers, particularly given the various schools that they are going to be moving through. So that was really helpful to me, and it's advice that I certainly pass on to my clients as well. Thanks.
Congratulations on your 500th episode, Mark and team. What an amazing accomplishment. This do-it-yourself family could not have gotten through the past few years without you. The piece of advice that really helped me was to respect the competition. This idea that no individual can have a true view of what the landscape of other applicants is really puts things in perspective. I love it when Julia reminds us that she knows that we think our kid hung the moon, and they did, but everyone else thinks that about their kid too. Thanks for an amazing show and your generosity of spirit.
So it's all about fit and match. It's all about fit and match. It's all about where you will thrive the most as a person, have a happy experience, grow, reach your full potential, be confident. And I mean, it's just nonsensical, like intellectually to me.
Right.
Because like, for example, like I hate cold weather.
Mhm.
So right away, I'm going to be happier in a place that's not cold than warm.
Right.
I don't like a school that doesn't have a campus feel.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a collection of buildings in the middle of an urban environment, that's just not me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to like that, right? I tend to like a lot of school spirit. If you don't have that, I'm not going to like it as much. I like diversity over not a lot of, like there's just so many things I could go down, and if you don't have those things, I'm not going to like you as much.
Yeah.
And I don't care how low your acceptance rate is, and therefore I'm going to be happier. And I'm just using myself, but this applies to every single person. They all have those things. We can talk about locations, whether you want a large city, small city, college town, whether it's size, whether it's strength of program, distance from home. Like all of these things are part of fit and match. And so if you can reject this, that school is better than that school, which is all about selectivity and name and prestige, and you can focus on fit and match, then you will be the one who will decide what is best for you. So anyway, I know that I probably sometimes sound like a broken record on this because I just preach it over and over and over again. But part of it is I see the toil that not having this perspective takes on kids' confidence.
Yes.
It's very, very concerning for me.
Yep. Agreed.
And Julia, you know about like the extreme mental health situations that what you and I have experienced together in some of the cases where we have done joint counseling over the last 9 years together because of people that just did not take this well.
Yep.
I mean, it can be really bad.
Oh, yes. Like I'm like very like not to say that I'll leave admissions entirely, but as Mark knows, like I have pretty much every day, this sort of behavior is what stresses me out the most and makes me want to leave college admissions.
Yeah,
honestly.
sometimes I have to talk Julia off the ledge.
Yeah.
But today was a better day. She was telling how great it can be when you have
When you don't
good
have that
kids,
situation,
and good
yes.
parents and reasonable expectations
Yeah.
and the joy of the job. So, so friends, hopefully, we're just trying to help. We don't want to see your kid go through what we see some kids go through.
Right.
And it's completely unnecessary.
Exactly.
And I've even seen people, even in places like Boston and Palo Alto, that don't have these adverse effects because the parent had the right mindset.
Yeah.
And they controlled the process enough to protect their kid from that.
Yes.
In fact, I've had several Palo Alto parents say, this is crazy here. And I'm doing every single thing in my parenting style to push back against it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah.
And so you can do it. But, so much of it comes from, it's hard because kids are so influenced by parents and peers.
I know.
I've seen cases where the parents were amazing.
Yeah.
And the kids still had major issues because the peers weren't.
Exactly.
So it's not easy. And then I've seen cases where the peers were okay and the parents weren't.
Right.
If either one of those is off,
yes.
You're probably in for a rough ride.
Yeah.
But you can fight the good fight. Any final thoughts, Julia?
No, just really hope people listened for that umpteenth time that we've said it.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, over the next 5 weeks, you're going to hear from Christoph Guttentag, the Dean of Admissions at Duke University. And it's going to be broken down into 2 different interviews. So the first 2 weeks, including today, will be understanding Duke University. And then the last 3 weeks will be a whole separate interview, but also with Christoph, on understanding how Duke makes admissions decisions. So in part 1, Christoph gives his backstory. Christoph lets us know the difference between the East Campus and the West Campus at Duke. Christoph explains the difference between the Trinity School and the Pratt School. Then I turn to Christoph and I say, Christoph, you're always asking our students why Duke. So I want to turn that question back on you. Why do you feel so much to go to Duke? And he has a great answer. Christoph tells us what the values are that Duke embraces. I share 2 stories that back up what Christoph says, and the second one is kind of funny. Christoph talks about the new curriculum that goes into place in the fall of 2025 that he's very excited about. And Christoph tells us what Duke Immerse is and why he is so excited about Duke Immerse. Listen and enjoy. Friends, you're in for a treat today. I'm here with one of the deans of deans, Christoph Guttentag from Duke University. Welcome to the Your College Balcony Podcast, Christoph.
Thank you so much. I just so appreciate being here.
Oh, no. Awesome. Well, you know this, but both my daughters live in Durham, and my youngest was a grad assistant at Duke, so I certainly appreciate the work you do there.
Thank you.
So we always like our guests to start off with their backstory. I'll share a little something. I feel like I see Christoph at conferences, College Board in Orlando, SACAC in Raleigh, NACAC recently in LA. And every time we talk a little bit about this interview, so this has been 2 years in the making,
Yeah.
But we always like listeners to start out with their backstory. So go ahead and share whatever you think our listeners will find helpful, Christoph.
I will say that I'm a Californian. I grew up in California, went to public university in California, didn't really have a sense of what the private college and university scene was like, and certainly what the admissions scene was like until I went to the University of Pennsylvania for graduate school. And it was there really that I learned the difference in how different colleges approach education, how they approach their communities, what it means to live in different places. I enjoyed my time at the University of California at Santa Barbara, but it was not a great match for me, if I'm being completely transparent. And that notion of finding a place that's right for you, of finding a place where you're both comfortable and challenged, really didn't occur to me until I saw something different, and I learned that. I went to grad school at Penn with the hopes of getting a PhD in musicology. That was, again, not as good a match for me as I wish it had been. And I needed a job, and I found one in college admissions at Penn, and over the course of several years realized that it was something that was fulfilling and enjoyable, that I had some facility with. And from there, I went to Duke and have been at Duke ever since.
Well, we're thrilled you're there, and you've been there for what? It's past 30 years now,
It's
isn't it?
past 30 years. Yeah, I arrived in 92. So yeah,
Awesome.
I think this may be my 33rd year. I think that's right.
See, that's when you know you're a veteran, when you lose track.
You do.
Love it. Well, I'll just say this, one of the things I love doing on this podcast is talking to people that sort of check the box for all three things. One is knowledge of the profession, another is just transparency, and then good communication skills. And to me, you're the embodiment of three. You're on the kind of I have a short list of Mount Rushmore list of about 7 admissions people. You know them all, and they just don't give us that PC answer, and it's so helpful for our listeners. So we're going to do that today and dive in. We're going to start out talking about understanding Duke, and then get into Duke's admissions process. Now, what I do in this interview is I draw off just a lot of different times I've heard you speak over the years, Christoph, and just kind of follow up on different things that you say. Our listeners like depth, and so we try to get into the weeds. So will that work for you?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So let's start out with, understanding Duke. So first of all, you've got an East Campus and a West Campus. What's the difference between the two, and which students are on each one?
There are two parts of campus, East Campus and West Campus, as you've accurately described. The heart of this is that Duke is to a large degree a residential community and a residential campus. Having the overwhelming majority of students live on campus in a campus that has a sense of space and it has a sense of place is an important part of it. In the early 90s, East Campus, which has always been part of Duke University, became the campus where all of the first-year students lived. So it is not just where all of the first-year students live. It's the center of the arts facilities. There's an auditorium. Our central auditorium is there. There are athletic facilities there. There are classrooms there. There's dining facilities, the library. So it is a home for the first-year students, but not the only home for first-year students. They go back and forth between East Campus and West Campus, and those two campuses are separated by a mile of Campus Drive, which has university buildings along the way, including the Freeman Center for Jewish Life, including the Nasher Museum of Art, including another art center. So they're connected. They're almost two ends of the campus, but the first-year students live and spend a significant amount of time, but not all of their time, on East Campus. And then West Campus is where the many of the athletic facilities are. The student center is there. The primary dining opportunities are there, and it's where all of the sophomores, virtually all of the juniors, and about half of the seniors live on campus there. So that it's a very much, the whole campus is a home divided between first-year students and sophomores, juniors, and seniors. But again, all students have the opportunity to have classes on East. All students have the opportunity to have classes on West. It's just a matter of how things fall out in your schedule.
All right, friends, let's hear some more insights from 3 more of our listeners.
Hi, I'm the parent of a high school senior, and the advice that I have found most helpful from your podcast this past year was actually how to complete the awards and activities sections of the Common App. Specifically, how to make the most of those character limits. I would have never known that I can start descriptions in the title line or use well-known abbreviations. And I wouldn't have known about using the preview button in full screen to show exactly how an application will look to an admission officer on the other side of the desk. So thank you for that practical advice on how to fill out the activities and awards section of the Common App. It was extremely, extremely helpful.
Hi, Mark. It's Will from Arlington, Virginia, and I just wanted to congratulate you on your 500th podcast episode. Quite an achievement. My tip is basically to have a notes app open when you listen to the podcast, because there's roughly 100 podcasts a year and a lot of different subjects are broached. So this way, if you find something that's interesting and might be relevant to you or your situation, that you just take a quick note on the date and the approximate time in the podcast. And that way you can go back later and find out things you might be interested in. And even though my understanding is that you can search for topics on the website, but this way it's a topic you may not even remember you wanted to search for. So that's my tip, and congratulations again.
Hi, this is Laura Ward. Big congratulations to Mark and the whole team on 500 amazing episodes. I want to shout out in particular episode 321, an interview with Dr. Christine Gengelhoff, Advice for Music Majors. There's such a steep learning curve with music majors, with finding a program, preparing a portfolio, auditions, interviews. There's just a lot to learn. And that episode got us started. So thanks again.
Great, great. And another distinction you have is having two schools, Trinity and Pratt. Talk to us about those two schools and how they're different.
Yeah, when you apply to Duke, you have to apply to one of the two schools. It's easy to switch between them. We don't have barriers for students switching between them. But when you begin at Duke, you have to enroll either in Trinity College of Arts and Sciences or the Pratt School of Engineering. There's overlap in courses. Pratt students end up taking a significant number of courses in Trinity College. Trinity students can take Pratt courses, but one is the School of Arts and Sciences, one is the School of Engineering, and students get their degree from either Trinity College or the Pratt School of Engineering. 80% of our students are enrolled in Trinity, 20% of our students are enrolled in Pratt.
All right. One thing you do every year, which I really enjoy, is you speak to counselors. I don't know how many years you've been doing it, because I've only attended the last few, but you speak to counselors after the early decisions are released, and you do a little bit of an overview of the year and what you've learned and the takeaways. And my favorite one you did was not this last year, but the year before, and a counselor asked you the question, "Hey, you're always asking our kids, why Duke?" I'm going to put you on the spot. Why Duke in 90 seconds? I love your answer. I don't know if you remember what you said, but I'll ask it to you again. Why Duke, Christoph?
I wish I remembered that answer so that I could refer to it in this one. I do love those. I do love those webinars. We will be doing it again this fall.
Right.
In mid-December, shortly before actually decisions are released, to give counselors a heads up. I've been thinking about Duke for a long time, and there's so many aspects of it that are appealing. These days, the way I describe it is, Duke to me represents the epitome of the American university in the early 21st century. When people think about a college experience, a university experience at its peak, I believe that experience is what we offer and what we represent in its breadth and in its depth. There's almost nothing you can't do at Duke at an unbelievably high level. And so we have the curricular opportunities. We have an atmosphere of a responsive institution, students who are both ambitious and supportive. So you have not just an intense academic and intellectual experience, but you have a personal experience that's enriched by not only the breadth of your classmates, but the attitude of your classmates where they're supporting each other. And on top of it, you have this very, if you will, traditional sense of school spirit and pride that people think of when they think of American universities, when they think of sort of classic universities. And then on top of that, you have this residential experience. Most of the students live on campus. Many students live on campus for all 4 years. It's a beautiful place. You know, the architecture is this classic neo-Gothic architecture. So when people think about college and they think about what kind of experience do I want to have, and at what level, at every point you can do that at a very high level at Duke. And so it's the right place for somebody that wants to have it all. There are students that are going to want to have more limited experiences or more tightly focused experiences, and they find other places, which is great. For somebody that has the desire to do everything, we're a pretty wonderful choice.
Now, you talked a lot about sort of distinctive values of Duke. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's almost like Duke's attributes, Duke's characteristics. What
Yeah.
comes to mind when I ask that? Sometimes I'll ask thought leaders, what's the personality of the school? But what would you say are the character traits of Duke?
I'll start by echoing something I said just a minute ago, which is the students are very talented and they're ambitious. They've been successful. They expect to be successful. They expect their classmates to be successful, and they manage to be supportive at the same time. Every student I talk to, and I do my best to talk with current undergraduates a good bit, very consistently they talk about the degree to which students in every discipline, with every goal, help each other out, support each other, study with each other, uh, that they don't feel like they're in competition with one another. They feel like they all rise together. And I think that is a real hallmark of the place. I think the pride and the enthusiasm and the spirit of the place that's shared by everybody is part of it as well. There's just a lot of Duke pride. I think athletics is part of that. The being in the Atlantic Coast Conference, being in a highly competitive Division I context, having aspirations for national championships across the board, that adds something to it. That adds to the spirit of it. And the other thing I'll say, I think I may have mentioned this on other occasions. The faculty really take pride in the development and the growth of their students. It's not a transactional experience between faculty and student. It's really a growth experience, and I see that when I talk with the faculty. I see it when they talk with excitement about their students and pride in their students, and that relationship of mentorship and growth and opportunity is an important part of what students experience. Duke is a place that is very good at making opportunities of all kinds available to students, and it rewards students who like to take advantage of opportunities.
I'll tell you two real quick stories that were triggered in my mind by things you said. First of all, the athletic school spirit. I was visiting, our regular listeners know this. I just came back from a 26-day California trip. Well, it was when I saw you at NACAC, Christoph, but I turned that into a 26-day, 20 college trip. And I was visiting with one of my students at Stanford who picked Stanford over Duke. And he said if he had to do it all over again, he would have gone to Duke. He said their kids were wearing merch everywhere. There was a spirit there. There was an energy there that I'm not getting here, and I didn't realize how important that was to me. I think that's partly what you spoke to when you talked about that school spirit.
I think you're right. I think that, and one of the interesting things, just to digress for a second, is one of the challenges of the admissions process for students, I think, is because they've never been to college, they can imagine themselves in college, but they really don't know what it's going to be like, and they're really not as certain about what's going to end up actually being important to them. And I sympathize with the challenge of that situation. It certainly happened to me when I chose college. I didn't know what was going to be important to me, and what I found out was that what mattered to me was something different than what I thought would matter to me.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say, you talked about the beauty of the place, the neo-colonial architecture. That West Campus, it's spectacular, and almost anybody that goes there will have that experience. And so we had a lot of relatives in for my daughter's graduation, and so I'm taking my niece to Duke, and it was a Sunday actually to show her the campus. She's from Minnesota, and I parked my car there, kind of up right from by the chapel. We're walking around, and I come back, and there's a $100 ticket on my car, and no, so,
Don't park in front of the chapel.
yeah, so this is the funny part. The message said, if you don't pay within 14 days, we're debiting your student account. Needless to say, they never got the $100.
I was going to say, in that context, a little bit of an empty threat. But yeah, it is true. People walk onto campus and they feel like this is what a college campus should look like. And when the weather is lousy and it's February and it's raining and it's the middle of the semester, there are things that lift you up, and one of them is the community, but one of them is just the physical beauty of the place, even when the weather isn't perfect.
All right, friends, let's hear some more tidbits of wisdom from 3 more of our listeners.
Hello, YCBK team. This is Rob. I'm a parent from Texas, and really, really appreciate your podcast. Congratulations to you guys on 500 episodes. I think y'all provide an amazing service, and I've gotten a lot out of. One point I wanted to bring up that I think is great that you guys do is really focusing on helping kids to figure out not what is the best school or what's the ratings on a school or how to get into a school, as much as trying to figure out what is the right school for your kid. And that's something that I've really taken to heart. One of the things I've done, partially based on what I've heard from your podcast, is when we did our college searches and go and do visits, I oftentimes don't even do the formal tour. What we actually do is I'll contact the departments or departments that my kids were interested in, and reach out to someone who's an advisor there, someone that's in the department in some capacity, and try and go and meet with them directly. And usually they'll have a student, usually like a student worker that'll be there. And you just get such a better insight in what the school is actually going to be like for your kid, and understanding how a day-to-day is, what the opportunities are, what the classes are like, and just the general feel for the university and for that department. I know it's been really helpful to both my boys in doing so, and I think they got a lot better feel and impression on some schools, that some of which walked in thinking, hey, this is going to be an amazing school. And after they met with them, it really figured out it wasn't the right fit. And sometimes quite the opposite, where schools were really surprising. So that would be my bit of advice is, instead of, I think there's nothing wrong with doing college tours. But, after you do about 3 or 4 college tours, they all kind of look the same. And you end up just looking at buildings and, hey, here's this building and here's that building. And you end up choosing a school based on who has the cooler rec center. It's a lot better to go through and like, hey, let's show you what the labs look like. Here's what the classrooms are. You can actually, and you'll have surprising insights from sometimes from those advisors, where they'll go and say, hey, here's some things to think about in terms of what kind of classes you want to be taking or how you want to strategize. And, please reach out to me. You can already build that relationship before you even start. So, and oftentimes as well, getting that opportunity to speak with a current student that's there in an unscripted manner, to have your kid really ask them questions and get to learn and know things from them. So that would be my word of advice, kind of based around a lot of the wonderful insights I've always gotten from your program. Really appreciate the service that you guys provide, and looking forward to the next 500 episodes.
Hi, Mark and the YCBK team. This is John from New Jersey, a longtime listener and first-time caller. You are all so amazing. Getting to 500 episodes is wonderful, both for the accomplishment itself and for the amount of knowledge you've spread relating to the college admissions journey. 500 episodes means tens of thousands of tidbits of advice, so thank you for letting us, your listeners, spread the wisdom we've learned. For this speak pipe, I'd like to give a top 10 list of wisdom I've gleaned from the many co-hosts and guests. This is long, and I hope it's worth it. I don't have David Letterman type sound effects, but here we go. Number 10, don't let your child ever give out his or her real email address to anyone related to the college admissions process. Set up a specific email. This minimizes the intrusion in their inbox, and it allows you as parent to help them clear through the maze of hundreds or thousands of emails to come. Number 9, use direct admissions. When my daughter went through the process, seeing the offers of admission and scholarships from, for example, the niche website became such a psychological boost during a stressful time. Direct admissions is likely to become even more prevalent, which is democratizing access to college in a great way. Number 8, your high school has a wealth of information, whether it's held by the counselors themselves or in repositories like Naviance or Score. You and your child can become far more sophisticated consumers of college admissions if you spend time understanding how your high school fares specifically at individual colleges. Take notes and use them wisely. Number 7, admissions officers and offices are your allies. They want to help. Even if your child will be horribly embarrassed if you open your mouth, ask questions. School officials want to engage and answer, and they're appreciative of it when done thoughtfully. Number 6, my 4 F's. Focus on fit first and foremost. We learned from YCBK to visit nearby campuses, to think about location, school size, school offer, campus environment, and so much more before ever getting into specific schools. Doing that allowed our child to narrow down her school list very quickly and in a manner that avoided overwhelming us or her. Number 5, set the tone that your child will find schools up and down the selectivity ranges. Then find those schools. Because if you focus on fit first and foremost, you will see that those schools exist. And even if your child is a hooked or a standard strong student, you will appreciate just how many opportunities exist regardless of a school's acceptance rate. Number 4, this is your child's journey, not yours. You are there to support them and cheer them on as they head to the next station in life. But this really is their next station, not yours. So guide them when they need advice, console them when they need support, and cheer them when it's time to celebrate. But make sure it's about them. Number 3, have fun. Too many parents are stressed by this process. Make sure to find the moments of joy and soak them up. My daughter and I had a running joke that we would always get horribly lost on the way to school tours, and it was always my fault. So every time it happened, we'd spend a good 5 minutes laughing before figuring out why we were on the wrong side of town. And yes, we'd always build in 10 extra minutes because we knew it would happen. Number 2, knowledge is power. Knowledge available to all is powerful. So listen intently and learn from the masters at YCBK. And finally, number 1, be thankful you get to be on this journey. Model that graciousness to your children. Thank your letter of recommendation writers. Thank teachers that have molded your children. Thank students that have given tours, even on schools that immediately fell off the list. When you practice gratitude, studies show you regulate cortisol, which reduces anxiety and stress and increases feelings of pleasure and contentment. So what an amazing opportunity to do good while feeling good in a way that allows your child to learn the same. And on that note, in fact, thanks again, YCBK team and guests. You guys really are the best. Congrats on 500. We're looking forward to the next 500.
Hi, Mark and team. It's Kristen from Chicago. I'm a loyal listener, and I wanted to share my 3 favorite things that your college-bound kid introduced me to over the last 2 years of listening. Number one, College Vine as a resource. Number two, College Aid Pro as a resource. And number three, Mark, your positive attitude that it is all going to work out. Let me just tell you briefly why I love these three things. Number one, College Vine for list building. We are do-it-yourselfers, and we aren't using a college counselor to support list building. And I found that collegevine.com was an amazing resource for giving us easy to visualize access to the common data set and a way that my kiddo could go into it herself and see where would she have a great chance of getting in and where it would be a reach. And this is so much better than mom telling her, and was so much easier to use than the scatter plots created by Naviance. So a great way to build a balanced list filled with schools that she was reaching for and filled with schools that she would definitely get in. Number two, College Aid Pro. My kid tends to be very optimistic and believe it's all going to work out. And I know that school is really expensive, Mom, but for sure I'll get some scholarships. College Aid Pro brought everything down to the realistic level of, yes, there are lots of schools out there that will give you scholarships, and there are lots of schools that won't. And building out that aspect of our list was really invaluable with College Aid Pro, and that came to us through your podcast. Lastly, and probably most importantly, Mark and team, I am so grateful for your constant reminders that it is all going to work out, and it does not really matter that much where you get into school. It matters a lot more what you do when you get there. And I remind my child of that all the time. So just super grateful for the encouragement and the resources. We definitely would not be where we are without you all. So congrats on your 500th. Keep up the great work.
Christoph, I've heard you talk about a new curriculum that goes into place in fall of 2025. Talk to us about what has changed and why you made the change.
I'm really excited by the new curriculum. The last time that the faculty designed a new curriculum, or really curricular requirements, if you will, or curricular emphases, was in 2000. And I think there was the sense, I know there was the sense that times change, requirements change, students change, what they need changes, and over time, the faculty got a sense of what they wanted to emphasize in the new curriculum, and there are a number of things that are new about it. It's a little simpler in its requirements. It's a little less complex. I love the emphasis on collaboration, on small group learning right from the first year. I like a somewhat greater emphasis on the arts and the humanities, which I think is appropriate. I love the development of something that they are calling century courses, which are courses. The idea of century courses are if a faculty member could only teach one course to expose someone to a discipline, what would that course entail? And so this idea of really giving students the opportunity to understand the basic principles and the basic issues in a particular discipline efficiently, interestingly, in an area that a faculty member loves, I think is just a wonderful opportunity for students who are often focusing on one or two different areas, who again have aspirations, but who come to Duke with the idea of there is so much to learn out there. And the more broadly I'm exposed to ideas and concepts and perspectives, the better citizen I can be. So there's that opportunity of breadth. There's that collaboration. There's emphasizing giving students the opportunity to be curious, to wonder, to be open to new ideas, different ideas. Everybody comes to Duke with their particular set of experiences. They come to Duke very well prepared. They come to Duke quite accomplished. But always, by definition, limited. And the idea is when you come to a place at Duke which has wonderful curricular offerings, it has faculty that are just so good, that has students from all over, let's lean into that notion that there is much to learn in many areas that a student hasn't been exposed to yet. So let's encourage that curiosity. Let's encourage that sense of intellectual humility, if you will, and let's feed that and give students the opportunity not just to explore one or two things in depth, but really to expand their thinking in meaningful ways. So that level of curiosity, that level of open-mindedness, and then finally, lots of opportunities within the curriculum to make connections among disciplines, whether it's something like Duke Immerse, whether it's an interdepartmental major. I mean, there are various ways, whether it's certificate programs, understanding that the world is full of connections and giving students the opportunity to explore those.
You mentioned Duke Immerse. I know that's another thing you're excited about. Talk to us about Duke Immerse.
Yeah, Duke Immerse I love Duke Immerse, and it's an interesting thing. I had the opportunity to do something similar when I was an undergraduate at UC Santa Barbara, and I've always regretted that I didn't take advantage of it. It's the opportunity to take all 4 courses in a single semester on a single topic, even though it's still 4 different courses. So 4 different faculty members teaching courses in a particular area that are related. It's the same cohort of students, so you're seeing the same students day in and day out. You're in the same classes. So you have this exploration in depth of a particular subject with the same students for an entire semester with the same faculty. The faculty are developing courses together, and there's often a travel component to it. So one of the ones this fall, one of the Duke Immerse programs is called Civil Discourse and Democracy, and most of the time they spend obviously here on campus in Durham. It also includes a trip to England during the semester, but there's a course on the media. There's a course on free speech on college campus. There's a course on the democratic process and the public sphere. There's a course on public speaking, all centered on this notion of discourse. How do we talk about difficult things in different contexts? What a great thing to spend a semester on while you're fulfilling requirements, and working towards whatever major you're interested in.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Friends, this concludes part 1 of a 2-part interview I do with Christoph Guttentag, Dean of Admissions at Duke at Understanding Duke University. We hope you join us next week for the final part. On Thursday's episode, Vince and I will discuss an article that appeared in the New York Times by Stephanie Saul on December 17th entitled, Suit Accuses Georgetown, Penn, and MIT of Admissions Based on Wealth. Our question from listener comes from Becky. She's a college counselor in California, and she wants to know, why have so few colleges pull out of U.S. News and World Report after they pulled out of the law school rankings? Whatever happened with that? Well, Hillary works in admissions at one of those schools that did pull out of U.S. News and World Report, Colorado College. So Hillary will take the lead on answering that question. Our interview is with Rob Franick, the editor-in-chief of the Princeton Review. We are looking at what you can learn about the culture of a college from the 168,000 interviews that Princeton Review did on college campuses last year. And Kevin Newton is back. He'll be doing a 4-part series with us on safe colleges overseas in our college spotlight. And friends, we'll close out with 3 more great words of wisdom from podcast listeners across the country.
Greetings, our college-bound kid family. I'm a senior from Missouri.
And I'm a mom from Missouri. I am a loyal listener, and I am so grateful for all the tips, insights, and expertise your podcast has provided through our college application journey. I have learned so much, but I found the scholarship displacement episode especially helpful.
I can't count the times my mom has told me she heard such and such on your college podcast. She had so much information to share with me.
Thank you for everything, and
congrats on your 500th episode!
Hey, Mark, and everyone at YCBK. I'm a longtime listener and the parent of 2 children, the youngest of which will graduate from high school this year. I started listening to your College Bound Kid 5 years ago when my older son was in high school, and because I had attended an elite university, I was very concerned about his prospects because he was frankly not a very good student and he struggled with learning disabilities. Your podcast was really important to the opening of my mind to the fact that there are so many options out there for every type of student and really helped me guide my son through the entire process. He ended up with several acceptances to really, really great schools. And at the time, I sent you an email. This was back before SpeakPipe, thanking you and your old co-host Dave for what your podcast had done for me and my family, and expressing my hope that I would not be lured by prestige when my younger daughter, who is an academic superstar, started her college search. You actually read my message on her podcast back in 2021, and that was my 5 minutes of fame. Well, I'm happy to report that my daughter did choose what many might have considered a less prestigious school over offers from some of the very highly rejectives because she decided it was a better fit for her. The aspects she considered when making that decision were all greatly influenced by issues you and the other members of your team consistently highlight. She ended up being a recruited athlete, so your interviews with Gus Resendez and Andy Strickler and others on that subject were particularly helpful. Even though my kids are now done with the admissions process, I still listen each week because I really do feel like you and your team are part of my constellation of friends. I love your commitment to helping people through such a critical and challenging time in their lives and to connecting with people in the college admissions community. I wish all the best for you and the rest of your team for the next 500 episodes.
Hi, I'm a mom of a senior in high school and a college sophomore, and I've been listening to your podcast for about 4 years now. I found it to be such an incredible resource for all things college admissions. For the 500th episode, it's very difficult to pick just one lesson that I've learned from the podcast, as I've learned a million things. So I'd like to pick 2 things. A big picture lesson and a smaller in the weeds lesson. The smaller lesson is about whether to submit SAT or ACT scores to schools that are test optional. Since admitted student test scores seem to keep increasing ever since schools went test optional, likely because only the students with high scores are submitting, I thought that colleges should realize this and view students' test scores within the landscape of what they used to be before they went test optional. However, you explained the business side of things and how submitting a test score below the 25th percentile makes it harder for an admissions officer to want to admit a student because this will bring down their average scores, which in turn negatively affects their rankings. It's sad that this is a game we have to play, but I'm glad that I knew how to play it. My second lesson is the big picture one that you end many of your podcasts with, and it goes like this. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there that determines your trajectory. So thank you for all that you have done to help people like me unravel the tangled web of college admissions, and happy 500th episode.
See you on Thursday, friends. And thanks for all your support for 500 episodes. Look forward to the next 500. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stelianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.